It's interesting when we tinker with the economy and we don't allow people to learn lessons, and we don't allow people to become more financially savvy. And we just tell them that they have to rely on these experts that work for Wall Street who probably don't have their best interest at heart. And it's like a vicious cycle that we keep seeing happening. And the reason we don't learn is because we believe that there's this philosophy of it's too complicated. You don't have the time. Just trust the people. And by the way, the people we trust, they might be brilliant at passing tests at an Ivy League school, but that doesn't mean they're good at creating value for people.
You know a lot of financial advisors. How many of them are just poor with their own money?
Well, and a lot of financial advisors are salespeople, that have just got licensed. It's the people designing the structures in Wall Street that make the biggest difference, and then it's their minions that go out there and employ it for them.
My first client was a good friend of mine who lost his mom, and when she passed away, he inherited her IRA. An advisor said, roll it into an IRA, it's for retirement. And I'm like, well, hold on, dude. Your mom died at 61. She didn't spend one day in retirement. You're 27. You have 33 years before you could even touch it. Is this your plan or is it the advisor's plan? Because 33 years later, dude, the advisor would sell her book and she'll be able to retire with that money, but he's going to watch it. I said, don't you think your mom wanted you to actually use it? And so when we came up with a plan, we showed him how the insurance works. He used the insurance, built a house. Now he lives in this like 4,000 square foot house with a family and 2 little kids and has insurance and doesn't fund a retirement account. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Cash Flow Conversations. And I'm pretty excited. I have a guy that I've learned about for years, read a number of his books, New York Times bestselling author, Garret Gunderson, who is not only a business owner, I'm lucky enough to call him a friend now, and excited about the conversation today. Garret, good to have you here.
Good to have you, man. Good to be here. Good to have me. Good to have, I don't know what I'm talking about already, tripping up. It's all good. I just looking at that sexy gray hair that you got, dude, and the last name Love.
Yeah, bro.
Good last name, bro. Like just dialed in right there.
I know, and I'm a twin. I have a twin brother. So we moved to a small town in high school, junior year. And when the Love brothers moved to town, it was kind of fun. We got to meet everybody pretty quick.
That's great.
Yeah. So New York Times best-selling author. How many books have you written now?
9 or 10 that are out. And then I have one that the manuscript's done that I'll be working on, which is using humor to teach the topic of money. And it's really meant for the masses, called Life After Debt. So that book, don't know when I'll pick up and do the edits for that one, because I'm actually in the middle of doing a full rewrite on What Would the Rockefellers Do? And it's now at the copy editor. It will be coming out shortly. So I'm excited. I think that book was my most popular book. And so I felt like it deserved a little bit more attention and a little bit of a update and upgrade from when it was written in 2016.
Yeah. And you wrote that with Michael Isom, right?
Yep. So Michael did a lot of he did some numbers. So there's Michael does the math sections in this next book, showing a lot of the concepts that we talked about and verifying them. And he added some additional case studies of real situations of implementing this kind of stuff. So he's been involved in this rewrite too. Beautiful,
man. That's a wonderful book. I've used it a number of times with clients. Actually, it's a very easy read.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, it takes a complex subject. A lot of people don't like talking about money, or they don't, and it's not a popular thing to talk about trusts and life insurance. And you laid it out pretty easily. Of, those are the two tools that wealthy people use for generational wealth.
Yeah, man. It's interesting because I just got a call yesterday. Someone's doing a documentary and they want me to be in it. And they were talking about all these families, some that I had heard of, some that I hadn't heard of, that have been using trusts and insurance as the two main, ways to perpetuate wealth. And, it's crazy because he was talking about one family that's, I think, 14 generations. And so, that they're going to share that story inside the documentary. And it's pretty interesting when you just simplify it down to trusts and insurance being two of the critical components for the perpetuation of wealth. Actually there's, you got to invest in the heirs and make sure they know what they're doing so it doesn't just get decimated. But from a financial standpoint, it's easier than most people think.
Yeah. You make it accessible. The thing that I really like, when you started in this business, you were only 19 years old.
Yeah, man. June of 1998, I passed my life insurance exam. Didn't even do the DI exam. I just started with life insurance. A lot of people do those things together. And then just a year later, I got my Series 6 and 63. And for a very, very short stint, I peddled mutual funds. It was a short-lived stint in 99. And then, was done with it by the year 2000.
Why'd you get out of that?
Well, the market started to go down. in the year 2000, and this was like March is when I really started to feel the sting, and all these people that had invested with me knew nothing about it. They just went, all right, here's my double E bonds. I cashed out because I was in a small town that was very conservative, and I put them in mutual funds, which were a lot more risky than I was led to believe in what I understood. And so when the market started to go down, so did kind of their faith in me, and so did their, overall feeling of security. And so when I went and, went to all these industry things, I had presidents of companies saying, oh, the market's on sale. I'm like, well, this is a shitty sell because people should have bought now, not before. It's not like they got a refund when the thing went on sale. And then people would say stuff, oh, you're in it for the long haul. I'm like, how do we know that we're in it for the long haul? And when does the long haul end? I just started asking annoying questions for them. And then the one that really bothered me is they said, well, just tell people the dollar cost average. I go, who the hell wants to be average? I'm just going to put money in. And this is the whole notion of that. Hey, the market's down, buy it's on sale. The market's up, get in before it's too late. Hey, it's flat. You never know when it's going to take off. So the answer is always the same, no matter what's happening. And it was like trying to create this mindless system where people just become sheep, hand their money over. And I feel like it's sheep going out to the slaughter. Because when we think about Wall Street, what are we thinking about? Wolves of Wall Street, basically taking fees. A lot of them weren't disclosed back in those days, especially if you put them inside of retirement plans, and the returns. 84% of the money made in the stock market comes from 10% of the people. And part of that's because of hedge funds, because certain people could sell short and they get to take money off the table. And the people that were long and just waiting for the long haul lose a large part of that money. Then we start looking at things like flash trading, where you have supercomputers consistently trading and skimming money. Then we look at dark pools, which are completely different prices for the very stocks that people are buying. And I'm like, why would I want to support and be part of something like that? I don't think a lot of people think of it as nefarious, but I do in some ways. Not the people necessarily that are promoting it and selling it. And I get if you just go, I don't want to think much and I'm just going to hand my money over. Okay, I guess that's what one of your main options are. Yeah. But the problem is, what kind of cash flow comes from the stock market? I mean, I think that people are ill prepared because they wait for 30 years, never creating cash flow over those 30 years. And you and I were talking about this before hit record. Now they're in their 60s and they're supposed to create cash flow, which they've never done with assets before. And their entire livelihood depends on it. So that'd be like me and you being like, we should do like one of those Iron Man things. Yeah, we'll just wait and do it one day. And then one day we're like, okay, today's the day. And we show up to do an Iron Man. And we're like, hey, dude, by the way, you have to swim over 2 miles. Probably going to drown. Oh, you get a bike 115 or so miles. Oh, then you get to run a marathon afterwards. And that's what retirement's like. It's a marathon that they haven't prepared for because they merely handed their money over to someone who then handed their money over to someone else. And they don't understand everything that's happening within that because there's a lot of forces at play in that market. And the people that win every time are the ones that are just taking fees. I mean, regular fees off that cash over time, and they don't really have any skin in the game or money at risk.
No risk. They're the only ones getting paid. They're the only one. I used to joke that a retirement account is your advisor's retirement account. They're the ones getting paid off of it every year.
Well, Matt, like people all the time will be like, dude, I can't believe you're a proponent of insurance. They tell me this, like, I can't, I agree with your stuff, but your stance on insurance, like, it's just so high commission. I'm like, look, I wish that I didn't, like, I'm glad I know, but like when I found out 401ks weren't what everybody thought they were. Like when I was studying it at the time, I was young and I was going, man, how are you going to beat this? It's tax deferred, more money than gets a chance to grow. And, the market, this was the 90s. I'm like, man, if this thing does 15% because people were thinking that the market was going to be like the 90s. And I was like, these things are going to be really hard to beat. And then I just had someone draw something for me. They drew a T and they said at the top of the T, they said, if you put $10,000 in a retirement plan, it looks like you have $10,000, but what happens if you take money out the next day? And I was 19. So I was like, well, I guess I get $6,000 back and the government keeps 4 because if my tax bracket's 30%, I have to pay a 10% penalty. So I'm actually I'm at $1,000 disadvantage day one if I want access to that capital. And I was like, okay, wait. And then I was like, but I'm not going to take it out. And there's a tax savings. They said, where's the tax savings at? I remember them just saying, where's this tax savings at? This guy, I'm Todd Langford. I'm like, well, I mean, what do you mean, where's the tax savings at? He's like, can you spend the tax that you saved? I'm like, yeah. He goes, you absolutely cannot spend it because it's stuck in the plan. It's not in your pocket. And honestly, Matt, I was young and it took me 20 minutes of thinking about it before I finally had this aha. I'm like, oh, wait, the reason I paid less in tax is because I didn't take constructive receipt of the money. I gave up the ownership of the money for FBO, for benefit of me. They say FBO, so it goes into the plan. It's deferred income plan, not a deferred tax plan, because the tax savings isn't something I can spend because it's that $3,000 that's trapped inside of the plan. And if I want my money back, it's actually a disadvantage because I have to pay the tax still. So even if it's a year later and we had the biggest run on the market, we had 100% return. And so now I'm at $20,000 a year later. And I'm like, this is awesome.
More money.
I want to take my money out. Well, now I'd have to pay I have to pay $2,000 for the right to my money. And I have to pay $6,000 of tax. So I have $12,000 left over. And the reality is, if that would have been in cash value insurance, if that would have been in a Roth IRA, or if it would have been in any type of, like, it didn't matter if I put after-tax dollars in, because I'd still have the same amount, because everyone thinks that compounding, but guess what? You still have a compounded tax. The tax doesn't just stay where you put it in the first year. You have to pay on the gain when you pull it out. And so I was like, wait, this money's not in my pocket. It's in the plan. So I'm like, wait, there's no cash flow. There's restrictions. That's FBO. So if the government changes the rules, I'm at their mercy, which they're, $34 trillion in debt right now. So I don't really feel overly comfortable. And especially considering from 1944 to 1981, the top tax bracket was over 50%. And, with the debt that we have, I mean, we could be heading for, higher tax rates in the future. So I might be delaying tax. And then when I go to take the money out, have less than if I wouldn't have put it in the plan. So I'm not only frustrated about that. Now back when I was looking at these things, there was massive lawsuits that went on because there was no disclosure of fees. And the lack of disclosure was, there were disclosed fees like expense ratios for the mutual funds and the 12B1 fees for the mutual funds that were inside of it. And maybe the basic fee that was going for the plan, but then they had all these admin fees, legal fees. They had all these fees that they were not disclosing. And it was an engineering firm out of Seattle that was actually analyzing their company's 401k and said, the numbers don't add up. They don't make sense. It's almost like they were finding out 401ks were like a Bernie Madoff taking people's money. And then they sued, they won, and it made the back page of the Wall Street Journal. It wasn't even a front page story, which made me be like, well, this is frustrating because that should be a massive story, that there are all these fees that were being taken out. And we've seen firms like Edward Jones get sued over and over and over for a lack of disclosure of the fees. And the problem is, if you don't know what fees you're paying, like small fees make big differences. The numbers I always have in my mind is $100,000 over 30 years, earning 10%, grows to 1.74 million if there's no tax on it. $100,000 at 9.2% grows to 1.4 million. So it's less than 1%, but it's a $340,000 impact. So the studies that have shown the impact of fees are astronomical on the impact it has on these plans. So not only do you have the fee of the fund that supports the plan, you had the fees of the plans, which were exaggerated and ridiculous. And so I don't have any passion towards it really at all. I called it the greatest sacred cow to kill was the 401k.
100%. So a lot of people benefit from it because they don't want to be a steward of their money. They want to set it and forget it and not think about it. Cool, go do that. But for people who are interested, think about what you just said. Not only does a fee have a massive impact, when you hit retirement, the fees don't stop. Those fees go on forever. When you're gone, whoever you leave the money to, they pay the fee. Like the fees go on forever. So when your friends say, they're pushing back on the insurance because of the commission, do the math. I would rather pay a small commission on the insurance than a fee that goes on for life. Mathematically, it's astronomically different.
Even if it's a large commission on the insurance, the public will say, look at these insurance agents making big commissions. Well, if you and I were willing to sell 401ks, we not only get the fee on that plan for as long as the plan's around, if we choose to sell that book of business, it's a 12 to 15 times multiple. That is massive.
It's the advisor's retirement plan. It's not the client's.
That's and so I mean, I really
But
believe.
think about this too, Garrett. I had this epiphany, and this is in my book. If you were the one thing I love about entrepreneurs is that when we see something, we have the ability to pivot and take action. And so you dropped your licenses and stopped doing that because you're not a fan and you're not going to do that any longer. But for the advisors that do like it, if you were an advisor charging a fee, would you rather charge a fee on a pre-taxed amount or a post-taxed account?
You're going to pre-tax account because you get to earn fees on the government's money, not just the client's money.
Exactly. The clients are paying fees on money that has to go to the IRS. So think about what happens in the industry. You get a CPA that's a historian. Seldom do CPAs look forward and try and be proactive with taxation. They look backward and say, what did you do in the past and what can we deduct and whatever. By the way, you can defer money into a SEP IRA. You can defer your tax. I'll save you money on taxes by deferring it into a SEP IRA. And then the advisor comes in cahoots and says, yep, I can manage it all pre-tax. So the CPA is acting like they're saving taxes, which they're not. They're postponing the tax bill. Then the advisor comes in with the parachute and then manages it all and charges fees on the government's money.
Yep. That's the deal.
It's amazing how many people don't realize the real issue when they have the guts to complain about commissions. It's obvious they've never done the math.
Well, I would say that the problem is the methodology of believing in accumulation and retirement. I'm going to accumulate money until I can retire and live off this nest egg. My belief is you cash flow and create financial independence. And while you're financially independent, you're still in your career, you're still working, you're still earning money. But because your assets can cover your expenses, you can actually massively build those assets with that active income. Whereas retirement is planning for bankruptcy. Hey, I'm now retired. I'm going to stop working. And now I'm going to start living off the money that I've accumulated, which is the nest egg for the family. But the problem is that nest egg has these three things that attack it all the time: taxes, inflation, and interest fluctuations. And if it's not just interest fluctuations, it might be investment fluctuations that can really start to do something called disinvest, which means if you're trying to take the same amount of income in a declining market, you'd have to start taking more of the principal, putting your nest egg at risk, therefore jeopardizing family bankruptcy. And I don't understand why families keep going from generation to generation, putting the next generation in bondage. I'm not saying to give them inheritance, but I'm saying, why do you want people to have to use the traditional banking system, which is very fickle based upon the economy, happy to lend to people who don't need money, make it extraordinarily hard for people who do, and then people have to go get a student loan, which they can't even bankrupt out of, which it follows them to their death, and depending on when it was set up and how it's set up, might even follow their family afterwards. And so that's not a system I want my family to be part of. I'd rather us earn the interest by creating a type of cash instead of cash value, then when that person dies, have it replenish that trust so there's even more money that could be lent to the family at preferred interest rates with, not as many hoops to jump through. And now we're earning it versus paying it. And at the same time, when we're financially independent versus, just contributing and setting money aside and waiting forever, then there's a massive ability to grow your assets at that point, where most people are just taking 10% of their income. They're scrimping, saving, sacrificing, they're deferring, they're delaying, they're budgeting, they're annoyed by it. And that's why they want to retire so bad, is because they're just working tirelessly just to fund some plan that is volatile and going up and down that they don't benefit along the way. And when it's finally time to enjoy it, they might find out, there's not enough here because the economy changed, because taxes changed, because think about retirees that retired in the year 2020. Inflation attacked the hell out of their income. And because it was all dependent upon a retirement plan and Social Security instead of inflation protected assets, like look what happened when people had real estate. Real estate went up massively in value during that time because it's more inflation, it's resilient versus just, like 2020 happens, the market goes down, it kind of comes back because we artificially inflate it by just printing a ton of money, and then it's back kind of volatile. And so what do? I guess it's kind of good if you're retiring today and the interest rates are pretty good, so you could get a better cash flow than the last 20 years. But at the same time, treasuries just got downgraded because we've borrowed too much money. We're at risk of how could we pay back what we borrowed?
We'll never pay it back.
How crazy is this? Like anyone that does an investment fund where they take new money to pay old interest. What's that called? It's a Ponzi scheme.
Ponzi scheme.
Right? And yet, $34 trillion of debt, we keep borrowing money to pay back money that's owed before. It's a Ponzi scheme. Yeah. The only way they make it not a Ponzi scheme is by raising tax. But the problem is it's not very popular to raise tax for the general public. So what do they do to raise tax? Is inflationary measures. Printing money through quantitative easing creates inflation. And then they raise the interest rates, which actually starts to become a problem for them in the future when some of these loans, they mature and then they have to go borrow more money. They're replacing it with a higher interest rate, which for years they weren't worried about the debt because it was really cheap money, even though it was a substantial amount. And it's interesting when we tinker with the economy and just we don't allow people to learn lessons and we don't allow people to become more financially savvy. And we just tell them that they have to rely on these experts that work for Wall Street who probably don't have their best interest at heart. And it's like a vicious cycle that we keep seeing happening. And the reason we don't learn is because we believe that there's this philosophy of it's too complicated. You don't have the time. Just trust the people. And by the way, the people we trust, they might be brilliant at passing tests at an Ivy League school, but that doesn't mean they're good at creating value for people. They might just be.
You know a lot of financial advisors. How many of them are just poor with their own money?
Right. Well, and a lot of financial advisors are salespeople. I mean, that have just got licensed. It's the people designing the structures in Wall Street that make the biggest difference. And then it's their minions that go out there and employ it for them. Right.
Yeah. You mentioned, so all of these problems with the government, inflation, and the hidden tax, anyone who has a qualified retirement plan like a 401k or IRA is in bed with the government in that investment.
Yep.
They're partners, and it's a silent partner, and the consumer has no say in how much that silent partner is going to take at the exit. Like my first client, Garrett, so when I went from architecture to this stuff, my first client was a good friend of mine who lost his mom. And when she passed away, he inherited her IRA. And the advice at the time was an advisor said, roll it into an IRA. It's for retirement. And I'm like, well, hold on, dude. Your mom died at 61. She didn't spend one day in retirement. You're 27. You have 33 years before you could even touch it. Is this your plan or is it the advisor's plan? Because 33 years later, dude, she's going to sell the advisor would sell her book and she'll be able to retire with that money, but he's going to watch it. I said, don't you think your mom wanted you to actually use it? And so when we came up with a plan, we showed him how the insurance works. He used the insurance, built a house. Now he lives in this like 4,000 square foot house with a family and 2 little kids and has insurance and doesn't fund a retirement account.
Yeah, I think, imagine if we frame it this way. Hey, Matt, let's partner. I can't tell you what my percentage is going to be in the future, but for now it's 37.5. If you want out of this partnership, I want 10% above my 37.5. And if you, and 30 years from now, I might choose to be at 50, 60. And it doesn't matter what you do or how well you do or how poor you perform. My percentage depends upon my appetite and what I want. Like, who wants to enter that partnership?
No.
Like, and by the way, how many people trust the government? How many people are like, you know what? I really feel like the government has my best interests at heart.
They're going to look out for me. When the more successful I am, they're going to help me out.
They're absolutely, they're going to take care of me. So I just know that, I know I can trust them.
So you're a big fan of life insurance, which we all know, which I am a huge fan of life insurance. I call it the entrepreneur's asset because there's not the red tape when it comes to accessing the capital. It's a net, cash value is a net number where, your 401k is a gross number. It's gross to look at because it's not real. And so talk to me about life insurance, from an entrepreneurial perspective, using that money over and over again. Why is it, give me some traits as to why you think it's so valuable for business owners.
Well, look, we have a choice where we can put money in a savings account or a money market or a CD or a municipal bond or any other type of bond. And the problem is it's very subject to what's happening in the interest rates today. So let's say I have a bond and interest rates go up, my bond value goes down. So that kind of sucks. And it's pretty one-dimensional. I just get paid the interest that they give me. So I would rather have an asset allocation decision for those types of resources and put it in cash value. Now, the reason I want cash value is because it comes with a death benefit. It's protected from liability. it's not part of the banking system. And therefore, it has shown massive stability over the last century where banks have had major problems over and over again. So I feel infinitely more confident in the cash that's inside of it. But here's the big thing. If we're trying to build net worth, building net worth takes time. There's usually risk. There's usually taxes. I look at when I buy insurance, I bought a death benefit, which means I bought my future net worth, because that money is going to come in. Because it's going to be around a day longer than I am, which means I can start treating my other assets differently, knowing I've got a backstop. It could be used as an accelerated benefit rider that if I qualify for long-term care, I can use my death benefit, therefore preserving my other assets. So I'm getting this death benefit that comes along for the ride. And here's the deal, Matt, most people hopefully that are watching this plan on being successful. If you plan on being successful, if you don't have a whole life policy, what happens is you typically buy term, you invest the difference, and then one day you get a call from an attorney, or you call an attorney and say, I've got this estate, and they're like, you need to buy some insurance because you're going to have an estate tax problem. I'm like, whoa. We knew that could be the case. Why didn't you just prepare for it earlier? Especially considering the cash value will be comparable to any of those other things I've mentioned in return. But now with an asset that at that point is paid up, I never have to pay onto it again, and it's there, and it's income tax free. So I'm getting this death benefit, but my cash value is tax deferred. I can access it FIFO, meaning the first dollars I put in, I get to take out without paying tax. I could borrow against it for whatever amount's in there, and I can use that for other things and pay it back on my own schedule. So like, why wouldn't I want the multitude of benefits and the additional stability and security? The only reason that people wouldn't want it is because it takes longer to capitalize. It takes time for that to get to a break even or to be ahead of those other assets. And because of that, and we've been trained in society to be very short-sighted and analyze things based upon price and price alone. But the problem is something can be low price and high cost. Term insurance is low price, high cost. Because if you kept your term insurance to life expectancy, you pay more in premium than your death benefit, because it might be really inexpensive for 10 years, maybe even 20. Maybe you could get a decent price for 30 years. But when you look at that next year, the price is astronomical because it's designed to not pay out. Only 1.1% of term policies ever pay out. I don't really like to put my money into something that has a 98.9% chance of not being beneficial. I'd rather put it into something that has a 100% chance of being beneficial. And by the way, I've used my cash value along the way. I use it to finish the real estate development before. I've used it to buy my 2 cabins and be able to move on that very quickly. I used it to buy a business in 2014. I've used my cash value to pay off a really high interest rate American Express card when things were tight in 2008. I used it to launch Killing Sacred Cows. I've used my cash value when the opportunities arise, but when the opportunities aren't there, I feel comfortable that it's sitting there and that I measure based upon my tax rate and what my early policies earn. I have to get like 9.8% in a taxable account to equal what I'm getting here. I don't have to pay term insurance, so I've recaptured that, so like that's just a few reasons, but
I love it, man. I love it. So business owners think for themselves. It's a different mentality than like a W-2 employee. So insurance is for somebody who wants to actually use their money over and over again before retirement age and purchase things like cash flowing assets.
Yep.
Now, do you use much, or what do you think of indexed life insurance?
I have 27 whole life policies and 1 index policy.
So your favorite about 50-50.
The reason I don't use the index policies is because I'm not trying to compete against other returns. I'm using the cash as a midterm storage facility that I could capture money in, I can count on it being there, and I can utilize when I want without having variable factors that could put my capital at risk. I'm looking at long-term and legacy, where in the index side, we've got a couple issues. Number one, how much will be in the options budget for that index to perform is based upon economic factors I don't control. And based upon the competitive nature of that, there might be years where they lower the amount I can earn in a time where the market did pretty well. So I don't want to have that limited upside, because again, I'm using this as a savings alternative and a banking alternative, not as an investment account. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of the stock market. So why would I go into indexes and then limit the upside just so I can protect the downside. We can look at long periods of time, and indexes that have caps and floors outperform eventually to a market if given enough time. So it's another thing is I get the story sounds really good. And then the other factor is they look at universal life policies and say, how many people that own this policy out of 1,000 died? And based upon their experience of that, they can change your cost of insurance, which would then start to pull away at your cash. The second thing is as you age, just like term insurance, the older you get, the higher the cost of insurance is. Yeah. What the agents will show those is say, but the more cash you have, the less amount that's being charged. And that's true. So in one sense, there's more cash there, but I can't pull that cash out and just take a withdrawal because now it would be, create a higher cost of insurance. So I'm incentivized never to just take a withdrawal. I always have to take a loan. Yeah. And then secondarily, what we look at the guaranteed cost versus the current cost, that is a wide gap. And if it ever goes early to the guaranteed cost, it actually eats away at the cash value completely. And if that ever happens and your policy lapses when you borrowed money, you have to pay tax on the money that you borrowed. So I don't want to ever have that risk. I don't want to have to add riders that say, well, if I live long, if I live to this age, then it's guaranteed they'll never lapse it on me. And then I don't have that risk. But what about that corridor of maybe 5 years or 10 years? I don't want, I'm into the risk mitigation business with my capital. And where I take risks are in writing books, in building a business, and in some real estate that I have close knowledge and attachment to that I can personally utilize. Those are my investment skills. When I start investing where other people's investment skills are required to fuel the return, I feel less in control. And I don't want to ever get to the place where I have to look at my family later in the years and say, I made a big mistake. We owe tax and we lost our insurance plan.
Can you imagine that? I mean, that's not a small tax bill.
And look, the only reason why people sell this at the level they do is because how old is indexed universal life? It's not that old. No. Like I remember learning about it in 2001, and talking to Indianapolis Life's product design team that did one of the first, if not the first ever indexed universal life. And it said it was already being sold in a way that wasn't reality. So when they're showing, hey, getting 8% a year, if you're capped at 10, 8% a year is impossible. You're never going to get it. So it's a fairy tale. And I don't want people buying into some fairy tale that ends up being a nightmare when they finally get to the point of utilizing it. And they're like, hey, all IUL is doing is creating a really bad reputation in the insurance industry. And it is coming from naivety, and it's coming from half truths, and it's coming from sales stories and not what's actually occurring.
I 100% agree with you. I think it's an easier way to sell insurance as an advisor. I think advisors can kind of take the easy way out and say, look, it's tied to an index, so you get a good rate of return, but they don't explain that downside. And the problem is that the consumer won't know about it until they're 60 or 70, in their 60s and 70s.
Well, and here's what they tell them. It's like you go to a car dealer. And at the car dealer, they're like, here's two cars. They look the same as cars. They look the same. One has 4 pages more of disclosures though. There's not as much warranty on it. And they're like, hey, this one has way more horsepower. And you're like, it does? And you buy it and you're like, dude, this year, that first year had more horsepower. But you're like, but I want to sell the car. Like, oh, by the way, you can't sell the car because all your equity, there's a surrender charge for that. So I don't like that lack of disclosure there. That's frustrating. And then you think, man, this car is supposed to be faster. It's supposed to be better. And then what you find out is one day it just stops working and the other car is still working. And it's like, it's like if I could go on a chalkboard and I say, do you like this number or this number? And everyone's always going to pick the bigger number. And the thing is, if that bigger number is just something that was pulled out of my ass and has no basis in reality, and there's 25 pages of disclosure of why that isn't going to work, and the other one has 0 pages of disclosure of why it wouldn't work because it's got guarantees, we're talking about 2 very different things and pretending it's the same. And 9 out of 10 agents are pushing IUL. And I know that a lot of people would want to do business with me or, pay for my content or whatever it might be if I was pro IUL, but I'm just, I have a good lifestyle. I'm not willing to sell out, just like I don't sell a 401k.
Dude, that's why that's why I respect your journey. At 19, you get into this, you have a moldable mind, you're willing to learn. And within a couple of years, you're like, I don't want to sell mutual funds. I don't want to promote 401ks. And I'm not going to promote IUL because it's not real. And the thing that it took me a longer, like when I started in my career, I worked in agencies, with the 65-year-old dudes that have been doing this for 30 years, part of the pyramid. And you just kind of follow along. And when you start making your own voice, you're going to get pushback from the old guard. And you just said, I'm going to go on my own and start preaching the truth.
Well, it's like hard to write a book called Killing Sacred Cows if I buy into the sacred cows. And if I wasn't beholden to a product, I could ask questions other people that try to be honest, can't ask because their income depends on a certain answer.
Yeah.
My income didn't depend on any of those answers. Like I wrote that book. I wasn't selling, I wasn't sitting down and selling mutual funds. I wasn't sitting down. Like we were a consulting firm by that time. People were paying us, $7,500 to help them build out their financial picture and build out their financial team. And we didn't do any transactions internally. We outsourced everything from property and casualty insurance to, I did life insurance till 2006, one-on-one. And then I stopped. I couldn't do a radio show. I couldn't write books. I couldn't do certain things with the company that had a contract with, and I just walked away from the renewals because my freedom was worth more than their golden handcuffs.
Yeah. Do you think that your old business was Wealth Factor, which you've since exited, right?
Yep.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And so what's on the agenda for 2024 for Garret?
So my children's book kicked off the year. So I Am Money, I Don't Grow on Trees just came out because my goal is to use entertainment to educate. And that entertainment could be anything from being really vulnerable with my writing in a blog so that people can feel connected emotionally. So it's not just academic, but they can learn from it, to, my comedy show will come out this year that I filmed, and it's all around the topic of money called The American Ream. So that happens this year. I'm going to do a little bit of a corporate comedy that companies hire me, and I go do that because who can do money comedy? Sweet. I've got a theatrical keynote. I've been booking that now, where I act out 4 characters to teach the 4 money personas. And that's, again, using entertainment to educate. And then I continue to really do everything I can to get money unmasked out there. My book that came out in October of 2023. I'm teaming up with some financial people to build a really robust software, and it can plug in with multiple software so people can see their entire financial picture in one place, analyze it, and actually, just have an elegant solution, and then start adding the content that I create inside that platform. Because I used to sell courses in the past. Nobody watched the courses. And I don't want to sell courses that nobody watches. You know what I'm saying? Like, they weren't that expensive. And what I found is people need support with a human being, support with software, and then the content needs to be timely based upon what they're actually facing versus fire hose. So my goal this year, sell a lot of books. And in those books, people can pick and choose what applies to them and then give them the support behind that. But, I'm done creating digital courses. I'm really focused on writing content with the blogs and with books, and then performing on stage to get the information out there, and then get people inside of a portal that actually supports their implementation of everything I'm teaching. And so we're partnering with a lot of different financial firms that offer services in legal and accounting and that, deal with every aspect of finance, and then have the types of coaches that can bring that to the world.
It's an interesting perspective. I have a financial course that I give away, and people are excited when they hear about it. But dude, like you said, 5% are going through the whole thing.
Yeah. Like when people pay, I think we got up to 10 or 12%. But when I'm giving away stuff, it's wild. But it, like, my whole thought process for 2024 is, how do I get people to engage with my content so that it can actually improve their life? And so even with my books, I'm giving different formats. Like if you get Disrupting Sacred Cows from me, you'll get 2 PDFs, but now I'm going to make it, well, would you like an audio for one of these other books? Because who's actually going to read a PDF? And just give it to them because they got the book, and not even charge them for that, for an audio book of another book I'm doing. And really focused on how do I make those audio books more enjoyable, because I just fire hose the hell out of people in Killing Sacred Cows. I had never read one of my books, dude. Reading for your pleasure and reading for a listener, 2 very different worlds and skill sets,
Yeah, exactly. And especially with that content of Killing Sacred Cows, it's dense. It's not a short book. There's a lot of a lot of aha moments while reading that. It's like I never thought of it that way, and it's intense.
We're gonna have Killing Sacred Cows 2.0 coming out this year, bro. I'm gonna rewrite it. I'm gonna like it. The principles are the principles, and I love that it from a book that came out in 2008 just holds up so well. But I've just become a much better writer than when I started with that book, and so I feel like I can add a new layer of engagement, and I can simplify a few things. And there's a couple chapters in there that are longer than they need to be, especially Money is Power chapter has too much fluff. So, I mean, and this is the thing, I actually read feedback from readers and was like, hey, they make some good points. Like once I get past my feelings being hurt early on, now my feelings don't really get hurt. Early on, they did, but now I'm like, no, I get it. I get what they're saying. And when my publisher did the book, they just wanted a certain number of words because it's a bigger spine at the bookstore. But I'm not going to put the new one in bookstores. So it doesn't matter the size of the spine. It matters the experience of the reader. Yeah. And so I'm really going to focus on that. So I'm excited about relaunching What Would the Rockefellers Do this year? Because I'm telling you, dude, I'm so stoked about the rewrite. It's really, I think you're going to love it. I mean, I'm giving a killer resource on legacy for free for the readers out there. And I'm actually going to have a process where financial advisors can license and put a forward on the book and their own links in it and actually have their own version of it. So that's going to happen this year too.
Phenomenal idea. So advisors can then hand it out and links go back to their own business rather than somebody else's.
No IUL advisor will buy the book moving forward. I put straight up warnings in there. I call it out. I mean, because I realized that I wasn't clear enough in the first round and people were taking the concepts and the framework of the book. And it's almost like they're making this beautiful muffin, but they're putting a dollop of shit in there called an IUL. And I don't care how good the ingredients are. If there's a dollop of shit, I'm not eating it. And that's part of the reason why I had to rewrite it. And I'm launching a program that you'll be interested in called Whole Life Certified. It's called Making Life Better. So it's all about how proper policy design and having a collaboration within the entire industry so that we could start, to build a certain reputation and make sure that people are getting the right types of structures and design, and we bring that community together to serve the world in a better way.
I love it, man. You're doing so much. You have a busy year ahead of you, but that's exciting.
Man. It's crazy because I have a pretty small team after selling my company. But I've just, with some of the partnerships I'm establishing, our reach is going to be so much greater than what I had done in the past. And, Wealth Factories, just they do some coaching. They have a ton of digital courses. It just wasn't who I was anymore. There's no entertainment factor there. So it was just time for me to move forward and build something on my own brand,
Yeah, I love it, man. Well, if I could hitch my wagon to anything, it would be whatever you create in 2024, because the old guard is not the way to do it moving forward. If people haven't seen the stock market take away their wealth yet, they will soon. Even real estate's gone crazy in the last few years. Yeah. So understanding what the options are and how things are supposed to work really is that transparency, I think, is going to be getting more and more popular as we go through, and people are going to be looking for answers for these types of things. And so giving away all that stuff for free is really important because it just grows your audience.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Garret. I really love what you're doing, man. You're a great asset to the industry.
Thanks for having me, man. It's been awesome having you out to my house not too long ago.
Spent a couple days fun, dude. First time in Salt Lake City. You have a heck of a view on that place. It's a cool town.
Yeah, man. We love our house. It's been a couple of years we lived here. It's been a long process to get it where it's at today, but that's where I'm sitting at right now. You know where this spot is,
Yeah, I do. You still got the Ayn Rand signed book in the background?
Yeah, man. You didn't take it, so that's the good news. You left it here.
I was Googling it online. Apparently there's a couple of them, but not with the Frank Connor signature and Ayn Rand. That's the only one I've seen.
So, yeah, it was kind of cool to do, get more than just her signature, because it was gifted to me with her signature, and then I got the other signature. So, yeah,
that's legit. All right, brother. Good hanging out. And we'll have in the description down below, we'll have some links where people can get a hold of you and see some of your journey. Maybe the new book, Money Unmasked, is a great one. I just got done reading that. So we'll be able to put some links up there so they can get in touch with you.
Love it. Thanks, man.
See you, man.